everybody. My name is Nicole. I'm a co-founder of VerticalCrypto Art. Thank you all for being here. Welcome to VerticalCrypto Art Invites London. As you've seen downstairs, we have a group show of 13 artists that are working with code and AI. So if you have any questions or anything that you would like to ask about the art, please come to me. It's been curated by us, so I'll be more than happy to answer any questions and explain more about the pieces. We have a very packed agenda of panels, which will start now with the first one and then go on until 6 p.m. this afternoon. We have a small break from 3 to 4 to kind of get lunch or snacks or whatever. And then we actually have an evening agenda with a audiovisual live performance and a DJ set as well. You might have noticed. Great entrance. You might have noticed downstairs that there's a performance piece that is happening around the gallery. The artist is an anonymous artist called Una. And I'm not going to share any more, but you'll probably want to ask her what she's up to, and do ask her. It's quite an interesting piece that she's doing. So this durational performance will be happening throughout the whole day. And we also have a live minting situation that Phil is going to explain.
Hey everybody, so it's Phil here. I'm co-founder and CTO of VerticalCrypto Art. We have a very nice installation downstairs by Portrait.xo. It's that big LED that you see. What is interesting about the installation is that it's controlled by an AI and is controlled by what's happening into the gallery. So we have a webcam and we are listening to all the sounds and the vowels happening into the gallery, and the feedback is creating a new generative art based live in what's happening. But we didn't want only to do that, we wanted to make it also something that you can take home and have a memory with it. So we implemented, thanks to, let's say, like Tezos technology, a great live minting experience. So if you go in front of the screen, or there is another station with another QR code that you can scan, you can go through the process just by connecting with your social login. You don't need to have a wallet. Basically, the social login is going to create a wallet for you, thanks to our partnership with Kukai Wallet. And then you can just click a button and mint your live minting experience. If you have any problems or you want to know more about it, I'm going to be around all day. All this process is quite frictionless. You basically just log in and click a button and mint your moment. You can also mint more moments, and you can also play with the installation yourself and maybe try to get the output that you want to bring home with you. Said that, don't forget to do it, because you can only do it here while you are at the exhibition. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. So with this, I'm going to introduce the panel, which is Art and NFTs, the Good and the Bad, which is moderated by Abigail. Abigail, thank you.
Lovely. I just want to take a moment to thank VerticalCrypto Art for having us here today, as well as the NFT Gallery for giving us the physical space to do this. And so, like Nicole said, my name is Abigail Miller. I'm the Associate Director of Web3 at Unit London. And we have Sebastian Fay here, who is the head of EMA at Sotheby's and head of Metaverse as well. We have Alexandra Art, who is the head of partnerships at Join, and then Valerie Whitaker, who is the head of art at Trilitech. And I'll have each of our panelists here today introduce themselves here in a moment. But we're going to be talking about a couple controversial things today, which is very exciting. But as you guys introduce yourselves, we'll just go first with Sebastian and end with Valerie. In your introduction, can you also explain why you're passionate about NFTs, so we can keep a balance of both positive and negative in this conversation with the good and bad? So Sebastian, start us off.
Sure, and thank you, and great to be here today. So Sebastian Fay, I look after Sotheby's activities in Europe and the Middle East. And then for the last 18 months, I've been, from an executive standpoint, looking after our metaverse and NFT business. In terms of what has led me to be passionate about Web3 is starting with the technology and what it can do to augment and complement the art world. Digital art is obviously not new. It's been around since the 1960s, and being able to have a way with NFTs to be able to show a trusted way to commodify ownership and the transfer of ownership gives digital artists the ability to have a market, to trade them, to sell their works, and for collectors to know what they have, what they are owning, what they are transferring when they trade. And it was that technology that brought me into wanting to dig much deeper into digital art, NFTs, and the applications for the art world. But as fast forward to today, looking at over the last 18 months, seeing how Web3, blockchain technology, metaverse can shape the future of the art world, both for digital and physical assets, is what is driving a lot of our time and energy at Sotheby's today.
Should I go? Yes. Hi, I'm Alexandra Art. I had partnerships at Join XYZ, so we work with a lot of projects focusing on Web3 communities and allow them to power different competitions and opportunities for artists. What excites me about Web3 and how I ended up in this space is I used to I am part of the launch team that launched .art in 2016, which is a top-level domain. And I remember sort of like our target audience was always digital artists because they're the most native to the online space. And I remember celebrating successes of like Rafael Rosendahl selling a website or Corey Archangel selling a video game. These were always sort of like one-off opportunities for digital artists to make an impact and to really be recognized in the art world. And so as Web3 progressed and as we saw more and more people enter the NFT space, I think it was a couple of years back that I sort of realized that this is an opportunity for finally have digital art and scarcity possible and encourage a new wave of collectors, but not only the traditional artwork collectors, but also people from the tech space, which brought a whole new wave of audience to this medium. And so having a background in traditional arts and combining that with experience within the tech and art space, I was just fascinated to go down this rabbit hole and continue exploring the opportunities that we can bring using the blockchain technology.
Hi, everyone. My name is Valerie Whitaker. I work as head of art for the London office that supports the Tezos ecosystem. The office name is Trilitech, but you can think of me as the Tezos representative here today. Sebastian sort of took all the words out of my mouth, if I'm being honest, but I'll drive it home a bit more specifically. My background is in selling fine art photography, something that is inherently an addition to multiple. And over the course of the pandemic, our sales were driven online, as were the sales of fakes of those photographs. And I was initially introduced to blockchain technology as a solution for this, given that most of the estates and foundations that I was working with don't have the money to hire hotshot lawyers. They also weren't going to risk slandering the people that were making these prints, and potentially didn't even have the money to actually buy one to get it tested, though it was quite obvious what we were looking at. So that's the origin story I have, but very much I come to the technology of blockchain with a fascination around what it can do to solve problems that have been, for the last 50, 75, even a century years, inherent to the way we do business. And we've compensated for it for so long. Along my journey, of course, and especially, my dedication to Tezos really comes from seeing what artists can do with the technology and also how collaboration breeds success, because that is not native to the traditional art world. Getting two galleries or two artists even to work together is like pulling teeth. Where what I'm seeing here in what's been happening the last 18 months and what I see for the future, especially within the Tezos ecosystem, is that collaboration is the key to success. And that just flips everything I know on its head. And I'm super excited about it.
Wonderful. As you can see, this is a packed panel of experts that bridge both traditional art and now Web3. And jumping right into, we're going to be tackling a bunch of topics you guys mentioned in your introduction. But my first question is, what are some inherent problems in Web3 and NFTs that specifically don't exist in the traditional art world? Because I think we often talk about provenance. This solves the issue of provenance. But what are some issues that Web3 and NFT bring to the traditional art world or other things?
I think when we think about the problems, I think we have to go back to that first thing that I mentioned before, the solution that it brings. The inability prior to NFTs to document ownership in a trusted, safe, secured, and reliable way for a digital asset stopped digital art being even part of the art world in a seriously meaningful way. So I get asked a lot about how we see NFTs disrupting the art world. And I think it very differently, that it's very complementary. It's actually a missing part of the art world ecosystem that is now being brought in. That's not to say that we are today in a place where collecting NFTs is super simple or understood by everyone or even demanded by all collectors. At Sotheby's, I've been really surprised with just how many people we've interacted with who were previous clients of Sotheby's who are now buying digital art as a result of the sales that we've been having. So the crossover that way, we've also been able to reach a whole new audience who are now coming in and trading in traditional art. So the crossover has been great because of the missing bridge between those two. But in terms of problems, the list is, I would say it's growing as the adoption is coming, but it's also shrinking. People are getting more comfortable with owning digital assets. When you look at the young gamers of today coming through and the skins that they're buying and the things that they're purchasing, the children of today who are coming in and the teenagers coming into their first potential collecting, they're understanding that digital art, but the user experience today of buying digital art is improving, and it's improving month by month as the technology improves, as new dApps and things come into the marketplace. It's still quite scary for a lot of people to come in. So one of the things we've tried to do is to make it as easy to buy digital art as it is to buy traditional art, allowing fiat payments and giving a semi-custodial wallet to our clients so they can start that way. I think there's other great solutions coming in, like POAPs, for example, for people to have their first free, like the downstairs, you can mint an NFT to your social handle and then convert it later once you've set up a wallet. But user experience to me is one of the biggest difficulties in bringing that. I think we're at an inflection point, but to get to mass adoption, the usability, the user experience is one of the elements that needs to change the most. And then there are other issues like the counterfeits that we were talking before, which are in both worlds, both in the traditional art world as they are in the digital. It's not new, but it needs to be solved in a different way. And there are other, you go into hacking and other elements of that. Digital security, those elements are things that are seen as issues in collecting digital today, but need to be resolved.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think user experience and onboarding, essentially, there are marketplaces like Sotheby's does, like Maker's Place, Nifty Gateway, which allow fiat currency, but it's then a custodian wallet, and some of them have centralized databases. And I think it's an ongoing debate. We're here for the decentralized future, but we're seeing a lot of centralized entities. And I think that's an ongoing thing that the space is yet to figure out. Like how do we move towards our ethos and also stay safe and fair? I think one more thing I wanted to point out, if we're talking about issues, is there was a book by Anna Dempster. There still is a book by Anna Dempster, and where she illustrates an artist's career trajectory. It's all about sort of the traditional art world and some of the steps an emerging artist makes that define the value of the artwork. So some of the elements can be an article, a solo show, a museum show. An important collector would collect the piece. And I think when I sort of entered the space a couple years back, I realized how there's no clear ecosystem for an emerging artist to grow. And a lot of people are asking, how do you value work? And I often say, well, similar in the art world, the aesthetic value, the innovation value, how Carla often refers, what does it make you feel? I think all of these are important, but I think for someone who is not from the art world, I think what would be great is to see more of those outlets and platforms, maybe that are not essentially for profit always that would empower artists regardless of how much money they can make for the institution to be highlighted, to be discovered. I think currently 90% of discoverability happens on Twitter. Like, retweet, share, show your arts. These are all very popular things. And actually, they do help. We do see buyers discover artists in these threads, but I think there's plenty of room of improvement of how new work can be discovered. And just like Vertical did Proof of People and this and the live minting events, I think, and Tezos is doing so many of those, I think there's room to grow.
Thanks. We've also got some cool tools that came out this week, by the way, that help solve this problem. I think for me, there's misinformation, I think, is also an issue. I remember meeting the co-founder of the Tezos blockchain for the first time and talking to him about royalties. And I spent the whole time prior to meeting him thinking, okay, don't say something stupid. And what I said to him was I was so excited about the permanence of royalties in perpetuity. And it turns out that was a stupid thing to say. They are not in perpetuity. There are people who may not even wish to or understand that they're acting as a backed actor who can remove those royalties. The systems around royalties, they actually will rely ultimately, I think, on reinforcement in the courts. I was at the Deloitte Art and Finance Conference last week, and this was a huge discussion that ended up in a constant debate. So I won't go further down that rabbit hole, but I think the misinformation around royalties is an issue. We see now lots of marketplaces taking away royalties, partially because of that issue. And then the second thing I think the ecosystem would really benefit from, and the whole NFT space could really benefit from, is a guidance on best practice. Seeing how many people are minting from around the world who, there's a language barrier often, but B, there's an education barrier in that they don't know what type of IP or licensing they want on their artwork. And there's not enough guidance out there in various languages. I mean, if we just consider, the ecosystem we have in Brazil or India, you're talking about 6 or 7 different languages and dialects, to be able to educate these young creators who are making things what licensing options there are and what they mean, and then when there should be exceptions, especially if they're considering, they want their work to be collected by museums. Well, if it's all rights reserved, how is that museum eventually going to publish a catalog or various other traditional art world options? And I think the IP and licensing in the traditional art world is an issue, but it's there is a best practice around it already.
Yeah, I think we've highlighted there's quite a lot of barriers of entry into this when you come from the traditional art world or vice versa. I want to switch the topic to decentralization, because this is another buzzword, and the tenets of Web3 is being decentralized. Do we think that should be fully pursued in the art ecosystem of NFTs? Why and why not? And what is there such thing as a Web 2.5?
There was an article I read actually just earlier today that was sent to me from our Asia Pacific office that effectively the title of the article was something along the lines of Web3 will excel with the benefit of participation from the real world. And I do think that that's true. That's not specifically targeting decentralization as a topic, but just to answer that specific question. Certainly, I know that the artists minting and collecting in the Tezos ecosystem are 100% about the value of decentralization. I'm still learning more about the benefits of that personally, the boundaries are limitless with decentralization, and I can't wait to see everything that's going to come from it. I think it's 100% the basis of this movement. But I also believe that, similar to my comment about best practice, that there are processes that might help to organize within that decentralized foundation.
And with this, Alex, since you've been in the space and you talk about decentralization and pushing a lot of these artists and highlighting such a great variety of artists, how have you seen decentralized kind of expand or develop as the years go on? Has it stayed the same? Not on the tech side, because we all understand what it means to be decentralized, but in an art practice of marketing and working with artists.
Like decentralized curation?
Yes, and as well as in a pure decentralized model, an artist is expected to be almost everything. Their marketer, their curator, their Schiller, everything. How do you think that works into the traditional art world, which is much more centralized?
Okay, so if we go back to define what decentralized and centralized means. So I guess centralized is when there's one entity and it has a higher, that's the decision maker. That's the one that holds the data, holds the sort of like the flow of traffic. And then decentralized means that it's actually open. So like we talk about closed worlds in the traditional Web 2 gaming environments, where if you have digital assets within the game, you can't really transfer it to another game because both of those are closed systems. And then an ideal open environments would be where the same assets can transfer across different places. And I think the key issue here is standards. So especially when we see large Web2 companies like Meta coming into the space, they have their own set of standards. They have their own decision makers who are going to define the user experience and onboarding. And as we saw with Reddit's NFTs, they onboarded about 3 million wallets in a very short period of time. And it was done completely in their own matter without sort of like having integration with any other different platform. They chose the provider and they went to the market. When it comes to curation in the context of all of this, I think we're definitely in a Web 2.5 phase. Not because people don't want to, because at the end of the day, it's a mindset, but because the technology there hasn't been a solution just yet that would allow true form of a decentralized curation or decentralized experience for the artworks to travel across different marketplaces. As close as we can see is probably when you have integration, when you see on OpenSea that you have a foundation item, or you have an item from Variable, or you have an item from Artblocks Drop. Like, this is an effort to connect these different platforms, but even like a year and a half ago, when you would buy an asset from Nifty Gateway, it was actually they were holding that asset. So if there was a secondary trade, it wouldn't be recorded on the blockchain because it was actually a centralized database tracking all of that. And only when you would take out that asset and transfer it into your wallet, that's when the asset would be actually on the blockchain itself. And so I think we're going to see much more of that. And it's an effort to also facilitate onboarding, because for many people navigating the wallet's ecosystem, downloading, like even Tezos back in the days, like our artists couldn't buy it in New York. So we had to look for other ways to onboard people. But I hate to be a skeptic, but I am a little bit, that as we see more sort of like traditional companies enter the space, they will try to hold on a bit more to the user data, to their databases, but adopting some of the elements of Web3.
Yeah, and with this, great transition to you, Sebastian, about such a tenet of the art world, Sotheby's is an auction house. As a centralizing figure in the art world, how is the company approaching decentralization in Web3?
Just to go back to the first question, I think the ethos and the direction and heading towards something that is open and decentralized is exactly the way that this movement should head and should continue to head. The onboarding thing, I think, is one place. So Sotheby's is not a Web3 company. Sotheby's is not a Web3 company. Sotheby's was established 278 years ago, and over that period has been trying to bring what is poignant to collectors of that day to market. And we looked at NFTs, digital art, as no different to that. As the demand for NFTs was going up, we wanted to get into the space to bring digital art, something that I feel has been missing from the traditional art ecosystem, to the market. We did approach this in what I think we would be discussing now as a Web 2.5 way. There are elements of the way that Sotheby's has, we were talking about the fiat payments, we were talking about the semi-custodial wallets, we were talking about some of the KYC that Sotheby's does in order to bring clients in. But in that step approach, we've also onboarded a lot of traditional collectors into digital art who wouldn't have been collecting digital art today otherwise. And likewise, we've also brought a lot of natively digital collectors to the traditional art ecosystem. So taking that step-by-step approach, but as we look to evolve our metaverse platform, Sotheby's Metaverse, we are looking at a more Web3 approach as we go step-by-step away from the 2.5 onboarding step that we had to take, not only to get comfortable with it as a company ourselves, but also to bring our clients getting more comfortable with a Web3 way of thinking. And in the more recent drops that we've done, more and more people are signing up with their MetaMask, paying with crypto, and taking more of a Web3 approach to collecting from Sotheby's than they were, say, 18 months ago where we started.
Amazing. And so now I want to switch the conversation from like the user companies more back to the art side about the artists, curators. And in our pre-conversation, we talked about a lot of the new mediums and mechanisms that have risen as art forms. Specifically, we talked about metaverse photography and generative art. Valerie, I would love for you to give a little blurb about photography, especially with your background in the traditional and how you've seen that evolve. And then I know Alex and Sebastian also had thoughts on this that I'd love to start with.
I see again coming up from the side of blockchain as a tool. I think it's essential to photography to use blockchain for discrete editioning. As far as photography as art on chain, I'm still very skeptical of what I've seen so far, and with many exceptions, of course, but in terms of the general standard of, I sometimes ask why on chain? Why is the JPEG on chain? Whereas, for me, the experience of a generative art piece on chain, it's linked, right? There's an inherent like DNA to it as the medium of art, but I still have high hopes that photographers will start to remember rather. That photography is a process, right? I mean, there are so many elements that mimic generative art. In fact, you have a tool and you focus it and you take a picture and then you have to remove in previous days gone by, you had to remove the negative reel, you had to develop it, and it came to life in the darkroom. And that's a magical experience that most people in this audience probably haven't seen physically in person. You might have seen it in like serial killer movies. It's the Red Room. I mean, I think it would be a really, really fantastic thing for photographers to remind themselves that they come from an arts and crafts debate from the get-go, and that experience in terms of the creation of the photograph is such a gap in the current photography experience.
But what about digital photography? Because this was kind of the conversation we had a little bit, is there is such a lineage of darkroom practice, but within the rise of digital photography, that experience, not necessarily in the darkroom, but like printing editions, is it the same? As well as, is there room for digital photography here?
I was in Riyadh last week in an artist's home, and I walked into their darkroom, and it actually made me think about this. A lot of photography has changed to digital photography today, and to me, keeping that on chain keeps it in its native form, and is therefore a way of recording in perpetuity that native form of the digital work. So as we've shifted, many photographers have shifted from film photography to digital photography, changing the medium of how that is stored from a print on the wall to a digitally native asset viewed on a screen, to me keeps it true to form.
I think you're, especially from the perspective of archiving, 100%. That's absolutely, I think, essential from that perspective. I think I was coming at it more from the creative experience and the collector experience perspective. But just to that point, there was a tool that I saw recently at Paris Plus that had encouraged a gallery to mint a catalog resume of an artist who did still imagery and video. And the ability to experience both side by side was really cool. And from that perspective, I absolutely agree. Archive conservation, the ability, especially as photographs are so impermanent as well, whether they be digital or not. I think that's, you bring up an excellent point.
For Alex specifically, you are a maverick in the space of supporting various facets such as generative art, blockchain art, and crypto art. What are some movements you have seen specifically with the rise of Web3 since starting in 2016 and earlier?
Yeah, I'll jump right to that. Just one comment on photography, because I think there's almost a divide between the traditional idea of what the photography market is, and also the way that photography and photographers that did really well in Web3 have been doing. And I don't think you can disregard the culture, because the market has been largely shaped last year by collectibles. So you would see collections of 10,000s that have consistency in traits. And if you look at the most sort of like some of the biggest photographers like Drift. Do you guys know Drift? Drift shoots? Yeah. How many people know Drifter shoots? Yeah. He sold at Sotheby's. So he has a collection like Where My Vans Go, and there's a consistent element across every picture where he would climb skyscrapers or very tall buildings and bridges, and it was mostly filmed in the US, and he would take a photo of his sort of like shoes and then like the emptiness down there. And I honestly, like, I feel like I'm falling off my chair every time I see that photo on my screen, because it's very scary. Like he does it all by himself with like, and he did extremely well. And I think part of that success is because there was an ode to the community itself. It resonated with people from an element of collecting the works, but also being recognized. And he has a very strong story as well. And he was every day talking to the community. So he wasn't, and I think community is what really drives the success of a lot of artists in the space. And then moving on to generative art, I think generative art is actually one of the first movements of digital arts. Like since the 50s, scientists were experimenting with how you can produce images in a creative way using the machine. And what we really saw in the last couple of years was the rise of long-form generative art. So when there would be a code written which the user actually, through collaboration and almost co-creation, is able to influence once he actually buys. So I don't know how many people have bought like long-form generative art from FX Hash or Art Blocks. Okay, if you haven't, it's really cool to check out. So when you go to buy and you click to mint, at this second, the code spits out a variation, and then that's the one you have. So you would have a collection of 1,000 or 10,000 artworks similar to the one you've seen downstairs, but each one is slightly unique. So there is a consistency across the collection, but you still own, as we like to say, one-on-one. Like your piece is unique and no one else has it. And that market has really evolved because, again, there's a very large base of collectors, so they between themselves can trade for variations they like more or less. And also you have this massive support for this collection to succeed, because let's be honest, every collector goes and shares on Twitter that they just bought this. So instead of being a lobby for one work, there's a lobby for 1,000 work of 1,000 collectors that are all supporting the artist. And I think it's brilliant how blockchain has allowed for this collaborative mechanism to work. For other artists, for example, Nahiko, token is the art. So actually, it's a very niche segment I'm seeing in the crypto art space, where artists are actually using token as a medium to express creatively an outcome. So, for example, they did a generative collection, which was called, I think it was called Smart Bags, and collectors were able to insert a token address, like a contract from another collection. So say you have a collection from, I don't know, X copy, and you would paste the address into the mint experience of this one, and the visual output would reflect that. So you, as a buyer, have an influence on the final outcome of the work. And I think this just reinstates how important collaboration and co-creation is and will be moving forward.
For sure. I want to switch again to the topic of curation, since we're getting towards the end before questions. Curation in the space has been a very controversial topic, because in decentralization, like, anyone can be a curator, but in the traditional art world, we know curators is a profession. Many of these people train their whole lives, have PhDs to curate properly and know the history. And a lot of the traditional world has viewed this Web3 NFTs of just almost slapping a picture on a screen. What are your guys' opinion of curation in the space? What can be learned? What are the goods and bads with that? And should there be more of a link to how the traditional art ecosystem operates with curation?
Should I go first? Do you want to go first? Okay. So excellent question. I don't know if Nicole's still here, but last year we launched a series of conversations about like curation and Web3. What is this all about? And I've been writing for a long time that people that should be curating digital art should have knowledge and understanding of the technology. I think that if you're a traditional curator and you're interested in curating in Web3, I mean, everyone is welcome, but there is a benefit to understanding why a certain piece is more complex than another. And I think that's what we were lacking, especially like curation, but also in terms of the news. Like if you saw articles about NFTs last year, you know what I'm talking about. Like people didn't have this understanding of the culture, the history, well, the 5-6 year history of the space to truly see the developments that was taking place. But I think we're seeing more of that now. And I know people who don't have a background in curation taking up curation as a master's or like side lessons just to have a balance of opinion. But unfortunately, we're also seeing influencers being hired as curators because they bring the clout, but that's something else.
For us, curation was one of the key sort of backbones of what we were trying to bring to NFTs. We were looking at, you know, the mass, you know, the OpenSeas, the marketplaces with zero curation, where anyone could mint a work straight and put it up for sale. So when we started considering how to bring works, we started with the artist, the creator pack. We wanted to work with an artist with a long digital career. So that's why we went with Pack as the first artist that we sold with. But the following sale, or one of the subsequent sales, was what we termed natively digital, which was a survey of the space going all the way back to Kevin McCoy's seminal work Quantum, which was the first NFT, or widely recorded as the first NFT minted, going through to the present day, and using our contemporary art specialists who had a long following in NFTs and an understanding of the technology and the art to select what they felt was important, what has shaped the space, and to write essays about the works. We brought in a technology company to do a condition report of every NFT that we sold to give more of an understanding of where the digital asset was stored, how it was stored, but the treating each NFT that was sold in that just as we would a Warhol or Picasso in our evening sale of modern and contemporary art.
I think there's a couple of different misconceptions around curating versus, say, art dealing or kind of shilling what you know is going to sell to an audience that you already have, which is fine. But like socialites can do that with handbags. Like, it doesn't bring value. I mean, it might make them money and it might help the artist. But then you have, I think, which goes back to, Sebastian, your experience with actually giving back to the work and paying respect to the work and having an intent around the complexity and the story you're trying to tell with the specific art that you're curating in one space. And that's when you have a person or people. Then there's the other kind of side of curating, which is when you have it based on an algorithm, which is the sort of, Spotify year look in the past or whatever, which will be coming up, I guess. You'll see the things that you were listening to last year soon. And that to me is also part of the discussion because it's happening now. And that's maybe not strictly curation. Maybe that's more of a a tool for identifying things that you might like. But I think there's controversies around that as well. But it does come down to intent and application. And I think what I'm seeing in the space of people who are actually like Mikol, really putting in the time, investing in knowing the artist personally or via their handle, or even if they're remaining anonymous as Una is today, and finding out what pairings, what dialogues, what topics work best together. And I think that will become the distinguishing factor of where we feel safe in a decentralized environment, giving power and voice to certain individuals or groups of individuals.
I was gonna say, what advice, because the bad side as someone entering into the space is there's a lot of spectacles of market, as well as if you walk into a lot of shows, it's a massive screen and you're just engrossed in the artwork and not necessarily being able to take it for the artistic standpoint, but it's just a really large screen. How does one entering the space navigate these spectacles as well as the pure decentralization? Because I think that's one of the biggest barriers, is it's almost too much information for these people. Yeah.
I think to me, just looking at the importance of an event like is going on downstairs, where the works have been curated, they have been brought here for a reason, they've been selected for good reason, and there are people here that you can speak to and understand and ask questions. And the first that natively digital sale that we mentioned before, we did an exhibition in Hong Kong, in London, in New York, and in Decentraland all simultaneously, in order to have that ability for as many people as possible to come and appreciate the works, learn about them, understand them. And I think the more that we can have this both digital and in-person discussion over to many people this new art form, which takes many different ways. There's many different types of NFTs. NFTs are very broad. It could be a membership token all the way to generative artwork, and understanding within that the role of experts and the role of the storytelling of those artworks, I think is really important.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was just thinking about a talk I did for one of London's museum's young programs for students. And I was giving my talk, and after the talk, I could see a very big divide between some people completely didn't understand. They were asking me questions like, if I kill someone in the metaverse, can I claim their NFTs? It was really funny. And not that I know of. And then other people were coming up to me and saying, oh, I'm launching this PFP project. Could you advise which chain should I use? And I was like, okay, some people are really ahead of the game. But then when I would look at their profiles, the description is NFT expert. And I'm just and I'm realizing it is true. NFT experts are multiplying faster than NFTs themselves. And how do you exactly figure out who's important and who's not? And I completely agree. I think if you go to an event and you see the artists that were pre-selected and it's an important institution that's representing them, there's probably a higher level of credibility. But I also think there are some outlets that are native to the space. So Right Click Save, for example. I love the Metaversal newsletter. I love Callow's newsletter about generative art. I love Fanny's Lakubai's newsletter. And I'm probably going to share this all on Twitter so people can have a take home. But some of these outlets give a very sober perspective, and mostly unbiased, about who are the artists to follow, what is the discussion going on, because it can get overwhelming. But I always recommend people to also have a Twitter account, because that's where a lot of these conversations happen real time. And I also saw a lot of people who entered the space last year. Their first thing was I'm going to write a book about NFTs. And then I read the book and I see mistakes because I saw this whole thing evolving really quick. So I think with these long-term commitments, the space moves extremely fast. So it's good to have several sources of information if you want to really keep a tab on what's important.
I think there's, that's super, super important, by the way. There are several books that I think missed out on everything that's happening on Tezos because they move too fast. In terms of just the question of spectacle, versus hype. Like hype, I'm not a huge fan of. Maybe it's my age, I don't know. But I think there can be a moment where spectacle awakens imagination in the general public. I mean, seeing my first Rafik Anadol, installation, or, even just taking my mom to the Klimt thing in Paris when it, first came out, and now there's like 30 million different ones of them. If it awakens imagination, that's when people might feel a little bit more brave in terms of going down the rabbit hole we're all so familiar with, right? And I don't think there's any harm in that, as long as we kind of encourage people to take that leap and say, oh, well, you just were really moved or provoked by a digital experience. So what's wrong with what we're all doing? And then I think there is a moment there, it kind of unlocks a door. So in some cases, I find spectacle in general as an art form in a way, immersion, if you will, to actually unlock some conversations that otherwise wouldn't have happened.
Amazing. And so one last question before we open it to the audience here. To end on like a positive note, with the good and the bad, what are you most excited for NFTs in the art world, and how is it bettering the art ecosystem in your opinion? I know this is a very overarching question.
I'll selfishly say all of the amazing tools that I'm seeing being built, to come from 6 months ago when there really were no solutions to some of these things, and to finally see hints of people developing products that do have good user experience, who have really, honed in on the fact that that's an issue, who can be ambassadors in this space in a way that's multifaceted, supporting collectors, supporting artists, supporting institutions, and finally bringing the discussion to a certain how do I want to put this? Single conversation around solving a problem. And I'm seeing that happening more and more now with some really cool things. I won't go into specifics, but that really, I think in the next 6 months, we're going to see institutions and collectors and creators using those tools and suddenly having access like they've always deserved.
I think one thing I really enjoyed about the bear market is the lack of these pump and dump collections. Oh my God, there's breathing room. But another thing is during times like this, people who truly care about the future of the ecosystem are actually really hard at work. I know our team at Join XYZ, we're extremely excited about the new things we're bringing in the new year. I think there are opportunities to tap into areas of creation that haven't been explored before. I think the generative art I mentioned was exciting. Then now we're seeing also AI art, and I think there are going to be more tools combining the medium and blockchain in a creative way. We're also seeing dynamic NFTs. I think it's for now, it's quite an expensive production process, but even today I had a conversation with one of our London women leading Web3 colleagues, and I know they're building a really exciting project. So I think the development of tools is definitely something that's taking place. It's just a matter of time until they're released. And I think right now it's just people are slowly learning about the space, and there's happening a more organic onboarding experience than last year. And I think the intentions are also a bit different for people who are joining now rather than people who joined because of the hype.
I think for me, the number of digital artists who can say, I'm making a career out of this rather than something that they're doing as a hobby or in their spare time, to be able to give up the day job and focus on their digital art, plus the technology that is moving at such a rate of pace at the moment. So much is happening behind the scenes that we're not hearing about. The ideas that have been pitched to me as decks a year ago, and then 6 months later showing this is now proof of concept with the technology now backing it 6 months, and we're just a few months away from seeing this. So the way people are testing the technology to its limits, and it's not always perfect when it comes out. The internet wasn't perfect when it came out with the dial-up and images coming down. difficulties there that we talked about, the challenges, but the way that people are pushing the technology to its absolute limits and testing to take it one step forward at the moment, and the amount of investment going on behind the scenes to allow that to happen even quicker than it has been over the last 18 months is really, beyond exciting of what's about to come.
Perfect. And I couldn't agree more with things are moving so quickly and the tech is very, very exciting. So I wanted to open it to the audience if anyone has questions for okay. Raise your hands one more time.
Thank you, everyone. Great panel. I wanted to ask you a question regarding traditional artists. So I have a gallery myself, and both digital artists and traditional. And what I saw in the hype was a lot of our traditional artists having severe FOMO in this new Web3 space, and working closely with animators to make their work relevant. So I wanted to ask you guys what you guys think, and if this new Web3 space is solely for digitally native artists or not.
I can quickly answer on a gallery perspective. I view it both as digitally native artists as well as a new medium for a lot of people. We see a lot of multimedia artists that have overarching practices both in painting, sculpture, and as a digital medium, I don't think it's anything else. I think if an artist ventures into this, they do have to be committed to exploring it. You can't just do one NFT or I don't even want to say NFT, a digital artwork, or conceptually using NFT in the blockchain and that just be it. You have to really add it to your artistic practice. That was my opinion.
I can agree.
Yeah, okay, I'll add 2 cents. So I completely agree with what Abigail said. I think, and we had, I ran Electric Artifacts for quite some time. We had a lot of traditional artists approach us, and I think it really depends if they just want to come and make a sale or are they there to stay. I think that's the first decision they have to make, because it is sort of like, how are you going to upkeep your market? You can't really have a gallery do everything for you in this market. But also, if I don't know, a famous artist, let's take a famous artist as an example. Give me an example of a famous traditional artist. I was thinking him, but no, he doesn't fit because he did NFTs.
Ai Weiwei.
Ai Weiwei. If Ai Weiwei starts doing graffiti right now, is he a graffiti artist? Because, and that's a question I'm asking, because people that, for example, work with graffiti, it's a lot about the subculture there, and we're seeing galleries take traditional artists, run a long-form digital, generative art drop right now. But does that make the artist a generative artist if someone else did the code for them? So that's that's my thinking. And I always encouraged people to, if they want to enter the space, to actually collaborate, not with for hire designers, but actually artists, and see how organically their practice translates with the practice of the other artists and release it to the NFT space. But I think it's also a case by case depending on the artist and their vision and mission.
I think the reason that we haven't seen so many traditional artists producing and selling NFTs is exactly that. They are thinking about it this way. If I want to use this medium, I want to do it in the right way for my work, the right way for my career, not just come in and see it as a cash grab or something we should be doing now because everyone else is. And I think there is a lot of interest. I think there is a lot of artists thinking that maybe in the future, this is something that I may bring in, but only if it makes sense. So we will see more, but I don't think there's going to be this huge shift over that people were in some way fearing or expecting a year ago.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Interesting talk. In terms of good and bad, I guess a lot of artists, when they first started minting, kind of made that decision around choosing the blockchain. So, a lot of people went to Tezos because it was environmentally friendly, more environmentally friendly, and the community and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, with the Ethereum merge and those, that's starting to, those boundaries starting to sort of come down a little bit around moving around the blockchains. How important do you think it is the choice of blockchain? And with the amount of different blockchains there are, in terms of computing for artists about where to go, what are your thoughts on that? you know, as like I say, things are changing.
This is kind of one for me, isn't it? Push me in a corner. I think it's hugely important. I can tell you from personal experience without selling anything about Tezos that I wouldn't have joined another blockchain. And the reason for that is that I truly believe in archive and conservation. And if we're going to deliver on the promise of the blockchain being a permanent ledger, and it having all of those elements of proof of ownership and provenance, et cetera, Tezos has a very particular governance model, and I'd encourage everyone here to look into that. It's a governance model that it involves rounds of voting, lots of stakeholders. It operates in a way that really makes it incredibly safe as from an archival perspective. When looking at the merge, I mean, let's see what happened. A day later, OpenSea said it was going to accept I think it was the proof of stake NFTs, and Rarible said that they were going to accept the proof of work NFTs. And I'm like, well, that's kind of just as bad as forking, isn't it? Right? When you have that when you don't have that consensus. And that's really what I became hugely passionate about this. And maybe it's my half Americanness and the fact that I was here during Brexit. I don't know. Maybe it was that. But I do fundamentally believe that Tezos as a blockchain has an archival nature to it that other blockchains don't have for art, for digital assets. But I do also think that the blockchain blockchains as a technology are a tool that I would welcome everyone to learn more about and build on. And there can be reasons, I think, to build on various different chains for various different purposes as well. But from the digital asset perspective, you're not really going to move me very much.
I think from a collector base as well, to be thinking about following the art rather than just the blockchain, and being willing to, not saying I'm only going to buy and collect Ethereum based. Think about where the art is that you want to be placing in your collection and get comfortable and understanding of the technology behind the blockchain that's stored on. The interoperability will also, I think, increase over time.
Yeah, that's I think going to be something for the future that I think we'll all be able to benefit from too.
Hi, I got the mic, so I'll go next. About the term NFT, and this relates to the Aowei example that Alex mentioned. Nowadays, there's some projects that are foregoing that name at all. They're not using NFT, even though they're technically NFTs. Like there are a recent Reddit collectible, which is really big right now on the market. What are your thoughts about that being the move forward? People just saying it might technically be an NFT if we're speaking technical language, but for public consumption, they're foregoing that term to make it maybe more palatable, because some people are scared of it, some people like it, some people hate it. It's been big in the recent months, I would say.
I think that's, in my opinion, is fine. If you ask a lot of the artists, they don't want to be referred to as NFT artists. And I think that is perfectly fine, because at the end of the day, there is only a small ecosystem of NFT artists that maybe conceptually use NFTs, but really most of these artists are digital artists, and they just want to be referred as artists. And so in the art world, I again just see it as a medium or a mechanism of sale. I really don't want to define an artist based on that. That's my opinion. And then I think we're also moving towards a world in 5 years, most transactions are going to be on the blockchain. So differentiating what's an NFT, you're going to be buying your furniture, maybe possibly on the blockchain via e-commerce or something. So I think moving away from NFTs, in my opinion, is acceptable. In the same way that we don't really talk about canvas artists, or the canvas is just a medium, and I think there will be crypto art as a terminology, or other terminologies for the specific verticals within digital art.
I'm gonna add. Excellent question, by the way. I think that terminology is really important, because sometimes it makes it or breaks it. If you look at the headline, you just judge whether you're going to read the article by the headline. So same way here, naming is important. And I have a mixed opinion, because I have two different sides I'm balancing. So at a Rhizome 7-on-7 conference several years, 5 years ago, a very native to this sort of net art space artist, Alina, she gave a talk about the terminology when we talk about digital art and internet-based arts. And she actually said that we should not sort of like, if we call everything technology, it's almost like we're giving away the power to this god of technology. And we actually should be calling things the way they are. So if it's a computer, it's not technology. And it's sort of like we take back the power to name things by what they are. Otherwise, how far can this go? That like, is everything just going to be technology and we're not going to have these different naming systems? So, but at the same time, I actually, when Reddit did a drop, I looked back because 2 years ago, I was definitely promoting artists on Reddit, and I saw I was using the term collectibles as well. So I think it's about the audience you're speaking to, and there's nothing wrong with having, different formulations for it.
The specificity of language is something I speak to the entire sort of Tezos ecosystem about frequently. I mean, why are we calling it a wallet? Is it a wallet or is it a vault? There's plenty of things that can help onboard, and I completely agree. I mean, it's about meeting people where they are. And I do also agree, Abigail, like the categorization of NFT, is an NFT a tool or is it an art medium, right? And I think there's still a great debate that's going to be had about that.
We have 2 minutes, so we can have one quick question, I think.
Thank you. My name is Alex. Thank you very much for the presentation. So I heard so many times collaboration today, and also heard so many times sales and sort of it's here, etc. And they're doing it for money, not for promoting art. They do that. Sorry about this, but just kind of a joke. But what I'm seeing is NFT and collaboration are opposite side of exchange money, because exchange money is fungible, where NFT are a unique capture of data, which allows me to discover value, where exchange currencies and non-fungible money, pounds and pennies, allow me to do exchange value, price discovery, okay? And I think having more collaboration and NFTs will kind of work against the sales and money and fungible money. Do you see any kind of change of people doing things not for sale, for money, but for sustainability? Because I think when you collaborate and you have this unique point of data, you don't need to sell effectively.
I don't think the agenda of most digital artists is currency, it's money. It's not, it is a part of it. A market is a part of it, and but it's not all of it. And I think a lot of the collaboration that's coming at the moment is the technology, and to some extent the art as well. It's so nascent. It's taking a lot of collaboration in order for things to come to the public. And that's a really good thing. I think it's breaking down a lot of those traditional barriers, where there was agreed ways that an artist would have to go to a gallery in order to have space to show a work. Some of these things just don't exist in the digital world, and there's different ways of looking at this. And artists will go to what makes sense for them. I think, going back 2 years ago, there wasn't many places to go, but that's been broken down in its way as well. You see artists that are leaning towards the agencies. So UTA, CCA have a lot of digital artists under there. There are galleries existing. There are auction houses. There are lots of different players in there, and there's a lot of artists who are really working on the technology as well, generative artists trying to bring things that are completely new, where the commercial side of it is an afterthought.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think that's all the time we have. And again, I just want to thank you to the panelists and to Nicole, Vertical Crypto Art, and the whole team in NFT Gallery. So thank you. And if you have questions, find us afterwards.